Okay, well, it is 11:01, so let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone to our second day of the City of Irving Virtual Home Energy Fair. We're so excited to have you guys join us today. Last year was our first Home Energy Fair, and it was in person at our former Central Library. It was a lot of fun and a really good event. Doing all sorts of cool stuff this year, but of course with COVID, we had to change and adapt like everyone else, and now we are digital and online. So thank you for changing with us and supporting this event, which I think is a really, really cool event. So today, we are going to be talking about how to make your home more energy efficient and some different cool energy things you can do in your home, including building codes, which we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about electric vehicles, which is really cool. And a lot of people ask me questions about electric vehicles, so I'm very excited to be hearing about those today. I wanted to let you all know you can go to our website. If you Google City of Irving Home Energy Fair, it should come up right away. It's kind of the event landing page. We wanted to take the experience of having different booths and vendors kind of onto one website page. So there's YouTube videos, there's articles, there's tools, there's all sorts of good stuff on there. So make sure you check it out. I'll put a link to it in the chat once our presentations are starting. So we had a webinar yesterday on renewable energy. We have one today on energy efficiency, and tomorrow is tips and tricks for energy savings. So make sure you check them all out, but they all will be recorded. So if you aren't able to watch them live, you can always watch them later after the fact. So let's get started. So our speakers today that we're very excited to have are Miss Bethany Hyatt. She's the air quality planner with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which is a great partner of ours. And we also have Jason Vandiver. He's the Energy Code Program Manager for SPEAR. So today we're going to start off with Jason, and then we'll have Bethany give her presentation, and then at the end we'll do a big Q&A. So if you have questions throughout the event, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A, or you can hold them for the end, but either way I'll be watching them, so we'll make sure that we get some of your questions answered. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to unshare my screen, and then Jason, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Sure, thank you for the introduction. To presenter mode here, there we go. Like Emily said, my name's Jason Vandiver, Energy Code Program Manager for SPEAR. A little about myself. Prior to joining SPEAR, I've been with SPEAR for about 5 years. Prior to joining SPEAR, was the building official for the city of Granbury. Was a code official for the city of Temple. Before that, I grew up working on frac crews in the Dallas area back in the early 80s. So I've worn the tool belt and written the red tags, but now I'm a tree-hugging hippie working for an energy efficiency nonprofit. But I like to think that I've got pretty good insight because I've done both of those other two things. And you can't build a doghouse to code. You certainly can't build a house to code. So bringing some of that kind of common sense plus, knowledge of the construction industry, that's pretty much what I do for SPEAR. What is SPEAR? We're one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations. You see us here. We cover Texas and Oklahoma. Basically, all things energy efficiency. Back before when DOE had a little better budget, that was our main contributor. It's a little shaky now, but we do what we can for Texas and Oklahoma. We're a nonprofit. Most of what I do for free for the people I can help. The reason I'm not showing my video today, I'm still rocking the Corona Dew, as you can see. I'll even prove it real quick. See, I'm not even lying. What we're going to talk about today is I'll do a real quick, I know energy code is boring, so just a 5-minute kind of history of code. And then what you're probably more interested in, I'll spend 10 to 15 minutes on just some general ideas for tips and tricks to save energy in your home. So let's get started. Come on, slide. There we go. So just curious if you'll think about, oh, thank you, Kathy. If you'll think about, I've got a bald buddy that thinks my hair looks great too, but my wife and everybody else, not so much. So just kind of think about this in your head. How old is the oldest code that, that mentions building? Is it, and I'm not going to read the answers to you. The answer is on the next slide, but I'll give you another 5-10 seconds to just kind of look at these choices and think what makes the most sense, maybe when or how the building code was derived. Whenever I'm giving presentations for a building code specific type of group. I mean, I'm used to giving webinars to about 150 folks, of which 125 will be building inspectors. So they speak code language very fluently. When I give presentations to non-building code construction folks, I always like to start off with this slide, the old Code of Hammurabi. This is actually the code right here on a stone tablet. So those of you that guessed almost 4,000 years old were correct, 3774 to be exact. And I think if this was still a construction code right here, if a builder built a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built fall in and kill its owner, then that builder shall be put to death. If it kill the son of the owner, then the son of the builder shall be put to death. And I know how to write correctly. That's the translation. It doesn't go completely into English, but that's basically what it says. The codes aren't that way anymore. They get a whole lot more specific. And what we're talking about today is energy code. If you're buying a brand new home, House Bill 1736, you know, for a few years now, it's been state law in Texas to build to the 2015 energy code. Here's using a whole bunch of energy, a home back in 75. This is the energy use intensity index. Well, you see from 2006 to 2009 energy code, we took a big efficiency gain, about 12–15%. Then there was another 12–15% jump from the 09 to the 2012. The 2012, the 2015, and the 2018 are all within 1 or 2% of each other. So we're kind of static here. If your city, over 99% of permits in Texas are issued in jurisdictions on one of these three codes. Now, of course, a city that has adopted those codes, that doesn't always translate to one-for-one enforcement of the code. I get phone calls and emails from exasperated homeowners all the time who, hey, my house was built, you know, last year, shouldn't it have been, you know, they find out it was supposed to be built to the 2015 and they have a little energy code savvy and they're starting to point out all these things. And I was like, yeah, you know, unfortunately, you just got a bad inspection. The 2021 energy code, I'm happy to say, takes another about 10 to 12% bump. It's right back in here. Ultimately, what do we want to get to? You know, net zero homes. So that's kind of the history of the U.S. codes. What are all, those of you that don't know what energy, well, what is the energy code? What is that all about? Well, we have a plumbing code that says you can use, you know, copper or PEX or PVC for water supply. And we have a mechanical code that says, hey, your circuits in your home have to be at least number 14 size wire. And we have a mechanical code for HVAC, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the building code is basically dealing with the energy use of the house. And the way the energy code works, what's great for builders, but can be a headache for the layperson and or inspectors and or contractors to understand, is there's trade-offs left and right. It's great for the builders, but it can be confusing at the same time. And I just put a copy of this little snippet of what's called a prescriptive table. So you can basically build a house one of two ways. There's technically a handful of choices, but for simplicity's sakes, you can either build a house by putting NCT cog is in climate zone 3. So needless to say, the entire country, well, if it's needless to say, I wouldn't say it now, would I? So it's maybe not needless to say. The entire country is broken up into climate zones. You don't have to build a house in McAllen, Texas, like you do in North Dakota, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Climate zone 3 is the NCT cog area. We'll be moving to climate zone 2 because we're getting warmer. But basically, climate zone 3 says, so fenestration U factor basically just says how well your windows are insulated. That's what that number deals with. Glazed fenestration solar heat gain coefficient, basically what that number says is that 0.25 is 25% of the sun's energy that hits those windows comes through as heat into your house. So if that number is lower, that number was 0.10, only 10% of that energy would come through. So on your west facing windows, paying a little extra for a lower solar heat gain is a good idea, right? We have to blow R38 in the ceiling, and we need an R20 wall. So technically the baseline code is a 2x6 wall, but the vast majority of builders are still building 2x4 walls. And so they get a penalty for building a less than code wall, but they can make it up in a little bit better windows or a little bit better HVAC or a little bit better sealed house. So you can either build a house straight by these numbers, and that would be like a prescriptive house, or you can do trade-offs all over the place, and that's a performance house. But just to kind of give you the gist of how that works, I wanted to show the prescriptive table and just mention that those are the baselines and those can be traded off. Again, I'm going to get out of this code stuff really quick. A lot of builders gripe, oh, it's cost so much more to build a house to these new codes. And that is absolutely true, but I don't know a builder anywhere that spends an extra $2,000 on his house and just eats it. What does he do? He charges an extra $2,200 for it and makes another $200. So I don't necessarily buy that argument. The building code, it doesn't require a R60 wall. It doesn't require passive house, zero energy, solar panels. It doesn't require all that. It's a fairly easy lift to meet the 2015 energy code. And what all these numbers basically right here mean is, yes, it is more expensive. It's about $2,000 more. That's actually climate zone 2. In climate zone 3, it's about $2,500 more. The numbers still come out to about the same. Most of us buy our homes on a 30-year mortgage, right? Well, if I spend an extra $2,200 on a house, my monthly mortgage bill is going to go up by about $8 right here, right? If I save $18, $17 a month on my energy bill, is that house really more expensive? I mean, I would argue, and I think math is math, right? $10 a month, that's an extra $10 to spend in my community. So actually a house built to the 2015 energy code from day one is a cheaper house, just because, I mean, the offset is more than accounted for in your utility savings. So it makes sense. The 2021, I'll be real interested to see this analysis. PNNL will do this analysis upon publication of the 2021. But typically, energy code improvements are vetted at the code process to have a reasonable payback. So this should all work out again with the 2021 code. This is a little busy slide. Don't try to take it all in. This is from Texas A&M Energy Systems Laboratory. They have to track air quality reductions and energy use reductions. To make a long story short, sent from 2000 to 2015, code compliance, energy code compliance specifically, has cost builders about 1.3 million. That's more than that. It's 1.3 billion, I guess that would be. But the savings have, and that kind of aligns with that previous graph. You know, the savings have been more than offset by the additional cost. And you can see it there in the graph. Again, we're going to try to get out of this pretty quick. I just thought this was interesting. A couple more slides on Texas. Obviously, we've got a lot of the fossil fuel industries down on the coast, Houston area, but the amount of CO2 that we're emitting compared to the other states is pretty impressive, more than about twice as much as the second state. And I love this next slide even more so. This is energy consumption by state in quadrillions. Texas, and then I love it that we've got a state and then big countries, you know, is next. The amount of energy we consume in Texas is amazing. US right here at 90 quadrillions. And we know, I mean, 4 of the 5 fastest growing cities in the nation are in Texas. Buildings use about 40% of all the energy used is used in buildings. So making buildings energy efficient, it's a passion of mine. It's what I'm one of those lucky people that gets to do something they love for a living. And I do. I mean, once you put drywall up on a house, you're never going to go back in and fix the insulation. So getting it done right the first time is something that I love to teach and talk about. And that's why I'm here today. Happy to do it. So that's fine and dandy for new homes, right? But what about my old house? I demolished 72 houses when I was housing official for the city of Temple. This is one of them. This house, there's some compromises in the building thermal envelope, needless to say. And so this is the part we're going to talk about. I think that'll be more interesting for you, is what you can do to your house. And this will be real generic stuff, but it'll matter. Step number 1, and I cannot emphasize this enough, call your utility provider. Call your electric company. My electric company here in San Antonio, CPS, made a phone call. They come down here. I got 2 free Nest thermostats. I got about 80 LED light bulbs that he just gave me. He went all through my attic. He went all around my house. He looked at all my windows. He looked at all my HVAC equipment. And basically, 9 times out of 10, your electric provider will come to your house, do a complete energy audit for you for free, leave you a few goodies behind. And then on top of that, most of the time, in Granbury, I did this as well, and they were offering a $500 rebate to add 6 inches of blown insulation in my attic. Well, considering I was going to do it myself, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, these big box stores, you can buy big bags of blown insulation from them. And if you buy the blown insulation from them, they will oftentimes loan you the machine that blows it for free. And so, I mean, I could spend $400 for insulation, get a $500 rebate from my electric provider, plus they gave me a handful of light bulbs. So calling your electric provider, number one, absolute first step. They'll send an energy auditor that knows what they're doing. Now, if you call your electric provider and they won't send an energy auditor, or they don't offer that service, let's think about some other things we can do. This right here is called a non-IC rated can light. Most of us have about 40 of these can lights in our ceilings in our home or more. Well, 10 years ago, 14 years ago or so, these were allowed by code. And technically, this insulation should not be in contact with this can. But you see these big holes in this? That is to allow for this can light to cool, because they were made to have incandescent bulbs in them, which a 60 watt incandescent bulb generates 54 watts of heat and 6 watts of light. So if you've got an incandescent bulb, or maybe you're energy conscious and you've switched all these to CFLs, well, that CFL bulb, let me go back. That CFL bulb, if you look at it close, look up in your can light, and you'll notice you'll be able to see through if it has this non-IC, IC stands for insulation contact. If it has non-IC rated can, these holes literally communicate directly with your conditioned air in your house. And if you think about heat flow in the way, and I don't want to get too technical, but the term is delta T. Long story short, in August in Texas, yes, it's 100 degrees outside, but where is it 135? In your attic. So heat flow from 135 is going to be trying to get into your house more aggressively than heat flow from 100. Yes, walls are important, but where it's the hottest is your attic. Your number one energy penalty in a home is air infiltration. And if you have 135 degree attic air directly communicating in 40 different spots with your home, this is what it looks like on an infrared camera. All those can lights will light up like Christmas. If you buy enough of them, you can get them for about $9 a piece. I just took a picture of the box I just bought. Here they are right here. The cool thing about these, number one, they're LEDs. I was going to show the video, but changing these out is so simple that the how-to video on YouTube is 2 minutes long. Basically, you pull the trim off the existing can light, you screw this in, you plug the LED into the screw, and then this has a foam gasket that pushes up tight against your drywall. So these holes in here no longer communicate that 135 degree air with your attic. Another thing, I'm glad I put that note on here. So if you do that, or maybe you don't have you have IC rated cans, anytime you paint your ceiling in your house, you're going to pull the trim off your can lights. You're going to pull the trim off your HVAC diffusers. You're going to pull the trim off your bath exhaust fans. Take and caulk in between the drywall and the housing of all those items. Again, the number one energy penalty is air infiltration. So wherever you can stop that air moving will give you a huge bang for your buck. Caulk is $2 a tube. Super cheap, super easy. You're painting your ceiling anyway. Perfect time to do it. So this is a wall. And actually if you're having big energy penalties and your utility person won't send out someone, and you are a diehard do-it-yourself person and you just want to figure out where your heat loss is coming from, you can get a decent infrared gun now on Amazon for about $80. 15 years ago, they were about $8,000. It's amazing how that happens. But this is a shot of a wall right here. So this is probably blown. It's called a, so there's a bunch of ways to insulate a wall, but one way to insulate a wall is what's called a PEVS system, where basically they put a net over the wall studs. These are studs. And they take and shoot it full of fiberglass or cellulose. Well, you can see this wall cavity here. If they don't get these wall cavities full enough, over time they'll settle. Well, you might take a shot of your wall and the top 2 feet all the way around your wall have zero insulation on them. Well, that would be a time, well, maybe if you do have that case, when you're painting the walls, drilling some holes and filling those, you can see this little small stud cavity. They didn't bother to stuff with a bat at all. And so that's just, so, you know, step 3 is think about your building thermal envelope. Again, you want to emphasize the attic to house, but walls are certainly important as well. Windows are as big as well. I pulled this slide out of I do an insulation installation presentation. I know I'm going long already. I'll be done in about 2 minutes. But just the gist of this is to show you if your attic is R30, for example, and you're just missing 4% of insulation, the effective cavity insulation will be brought down to an R13. It doesn't work in a linear relationship. Delta T and heat transfer does not work on a 1-to-1 linear relationship. So having no gaps, heat transfer will find a moment of weakness. So if you'll notice, go up in your attic right now, I bet you have, these are called knee walls. I bet you have some of these where the bats look like this, or maybe they've fallen out. Maybe they're laying over on the Christmas ornaments, whatever it may be. Knee walls in attics, again, we have 135 degree. What I would highly recommend on knee walls in attics, you noticed, see here on this infrared gun, so wood is about R1 per inch. So a 2x4 stud is R3.5 or so. Well, you can see the thermal transfer through the wood. Well, this 1/2 inch foam, $7 a sheet. It has an R3 thermal resistance. So it has almost as much thermal resistance as the entire stud. You can take this, so if this knee wall is 2 foot tall, cut this 3 foot tall, leave it a foot taller, so you have a 1 foot dam to hold your blown insulation over those attic knee walls. This is what I'm talking about. So maybe this is on the very back side of your attic. You notice this living room's hot all the time. You'd be surprised when you walk back over here in the back of this attic, how many of these bats have fallen out of these stud cavities, and you have that 135 degree attic air directly touching a 1/2 inch of drywall. This is what it looks like in the house. Big problem with your building thermal envelope. If you want to get a little more aggressive and blow some, either remove your insulation and foam, or you're going to, that's probably a little much, but say for instance, you just want to rent that machine and blow another 6 inches of insulation. Before you do that, you don't have to vacuum it all out like Matt did, but if you will take and pull that insulation back and seal these penetrations, this is your top plate right here. This is a major leaking spot between your top plate and the drywall. Real can lights, HVAC, top plates, any of those spots, if you can seal those before you go back and blow more insulation. If you are going to blow more insulation, keep in mind, these are what's called baffles. Your soffit over here has ventilation. Your roof up at the top has ventilation. You want to make sure that air can communicate and your attic stays ventilated. You don't have that additional blown clogging this up and falling in. So make sure you do have baffles if you're going to do that. I'm running long, so I'm not going to show the little 2 minutes on the video. If you do have a 2-story, subfloors, if you notice, man, in the summer, my subfloor upstairs is always really hot. This is almost certainly the reason why. This also pulled from my NAMA presentation that I give for them. A lot of times this insulation is sitting down here on the drywall downstairs, which is good about keeping the downstairs ceiling cool. But the problem is, if you don't have these floor joists blocked and sealed at the end, that 135 degree attic air is communicating directly with the underside of your floor decking. So blocking and sealing, even better, while you're adding some blown, fill all this cavity with blown, and then cut a block and seal it at the end of that joist cavity. That will make a tremendous difference if that floor is getting hot upstairs. If you have any pull down stairs or attic scuttle holes in conditioned space, I can guarantee you those are going to light up like Christmas with an infrared gun. You can buy duct board and build a cover for an attic stair. Do not stuff it with a bat. You will create trip hazards. But what you want to make sure and do is put some weather stripping where this comes so you get a good tight air seal here. Build a dam around it and fill it up with blown. You can, if you have a scuttle hole, one of those little push holes, you can secure a bat to the back of the little cutout for that and weather seal it at the bottom. But attic access, that'll be a big leakage point. And then on the HVAC, this is the last 2 more slides, I think. If you want, you can spend $150 and have somebody come out and what's called do a duct blaster test. Basically, well, they'll hook a fan to your HVAC ducts, pressurize all the ducts. They'll measure how leaky they are. Or what I did, I just went and bought a gallon. It's called Mastic. It's cheap. It's $8 a gallon. It's this gray stuff here. And you'd be surprised. Go upstairs and look at your HVAC and all the flex duct in your attic and look really close. And it even works better. If your air conditioner's running, go up there and just run your hand along these seams. And I mean, just the other day I was up looking at mine and I had one of the seams blow open. I had a 1/2 inch gap, 8 inches long, blowing conditioned air into my attic. So going up and sealing these ducts will make a tremendous difference. If you want to spend a little extra money, you can have somebody come and test them. We regularly see up to 20 to 30% leakage in older homes, 40 to 50% leakage. So literally as much as half of your conditioned air blowing into your 135-degree attic pointlessly. With HVAC, maintenance is crucial. If you don't really know what you're doing, I highly recommend having somebody out at least once a year. I do this once a year, just take a high pressure nozzle on my hose. There's a coil in your outside unit. There's a coil in your inside unit. This is what these coils look like if they are not cleaned. Over time, they will get filthy. The heat transfer does not work in these coils. These coils are all about heat transfer. They do not work when they look like that. A lot of times you will have undersized, this picture is to remind me of undersized returns. If you had a hard floor and you went to carpet, so just keep in mind, if your master bedroom has a hard time staying cool, if you have 2 or 3 supplies in your master bedroom, maybe 1 in your master bathroom, and there's not a return air in your master bath, you need to have, according to code, about a 4-inch door undercut to allow that air to return back to the air conditioner. Obviously, you don't want to cut 4 inches off your door, but you can do some jumper ducts. There's some other things you can do. Or I just say if these 2 rooms aren't staying hot, you can cut you in a cooler and put some dry ice in there, problem solved. Last but not least, when you're purchasing new appliances, think, oh, I don't buy anything but Energy Star. For a lot of folks, if you're going to be in the home, if you know this is your forever home, solar is a great option. It's really coming down. The payback is way cheaper than it used to be. Lifestyle changes. I see all the time people on Facebook and whatnot, oh, I keep my house at 70, you know, and I'd be freezing in my house at 70. But the reason is I go out and work in the heat from about 4 to 6 every day. You go outside and sweat your tail off in 104-degree heat, 78 feels real comfortable. I mentioned the solar heat gains through windows earlier. Think about keeping your windows shaded, whether it's plantings, window coverings, etc. YouTube and Google can be your friends, but be careful. I would always get confirmation from one to the other. And that's all I have. Sorry I ran so long.
That's okay. That was a great presentation, Jason. I know I learned a lot. One thing I will say is I've heard some stories about if you call your provider and they tell you they'll give you a free nest, sometimes it requires cancellation fees and stuff. So make sure you're wary of that. But I learned a lot in that presentation. Definitely some stuff I'm going to be bringing home and considering. So thank you so much. Remember, everyone, you can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. After Bethany's presentation, we'll address those. Make sure you put some questions in because you have the experts here. So it's a good time to utilize them. All right, up next, we have Bethany Hyatt with the NCT COG, and she's going to be talking to us about energy and electric vehicles. So Bethany, if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Hi, Emily, just give me 1 second. I'm having some internet issues.
Oh, no worries, no worries. And I have your presentation too. If you need to, I can always share it for you.
Okay, I think I got it now.
Lovely world of Zoom. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Perfect. Okay. So hello, everyone. And thank you, Emily, for having me here. As Emily said, I'm Bethany Hyatt. I'm an air quality planner at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And I wanted to talk a little bit about saving transportation energy by owning an electric vehicle today. So just for some brief background about NCTCOG, we're the regional planning agency, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the host agency for the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition. Clean Cities was actually created by the Department of Energy in 1993 to address the requirements of the Energy Policy Act of 1992. And DFW Clean Cities was founded in 1994, just 1 year after the National Coalition, to address the ozone non-attainment status of DFW region. We are a part of a national network of almost 100 coalitions, and we work to advance the nation's economic, environmental, and energy security by working to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels and technologies. And our main focus is reducing ozone-forming emissions since DFW is still in non-attainment for the pollutant ozone. So that basically just means that we don't meet standards for we don't meet EPA standards for the pollutant ozone. So when we think about energy use, we kind of have to think of the total energy use, and transportation plays a huge role in total energy consumption in the US at about 37%. And one way to reduce energy use in the transportation sector is by using more fuel efficient cars and vehicles. So one of the most fuel efficient vehicles, especially for the light duty sector, is electric vehicles. And I wanted to quickly highlight this interactive registration tool I have here, which we also have on our electric vehicle North Texas webpage. And it basically shows the registration of EVs in the region. And it looks like Irving is actually right up there with the 6th highest registration of EVs in North Texas, with about 480 EVs. And you can also see the registration of EVs in the state as well on this website. So it's a great tool to just see, where your city is compared to other cities. And so why should you consider an EV? Well, besides being fuel efficient, most EVs are less expensive through the lifetime of the vehicle. Electricity is a domestic energy source, and Texas electricity prices are very low at about 9 cents per kilowatt. And electric motors provide quiet, smooth operation and stronger acceleration and require less maintenance than conventional gasoline vehicles. They are one of the 2 ZEV zero-emission vehicles on the road today, and the only zero-emission vehicle sold in Texas at the moment, the other one being hydrogen fuel cell. So electric vehicles are way more efficient than their gasoline-powered counterparts. An EV electric drive system is only responsible for losing about 15 to 20% of their energy compared to the 64 to 75% for a gasoline vehicle. And EVs also use regenerative braking to recapture and reuse energy that normally would be lost in braking, and they also waste no energy idling. So you can save money with an EV with lower fuel cost, lower cost per mile, lower operating cost, since you don't have to go get routine oil changes. And there are a couple incentives for Texans that can offset the upfront cost of EVs. And one of them is the federal incentive, and it's up to $7,500, and then the state rebate is up to $2,500. And we'll talk more about those later. So I wanted to highlight a couple tools you can use to determine emission impacts of EVs compared to conventional gasoline vehicles and other EVs as well. So here is a great model, the GREET model, created by the Argonne National Laboratory. and it is a well-to-wheels emission calculator. So you can see EVs actually have no emissions pump to wheel. So as you are driving your vehicle, there are no emissions created. The reason there are still emissions created in the well-to-wheel scenario is because of our grid mix. So since we are not 100% renewable, we have some emissions from the creation of electricity, whether that be through natural gas or petrol. And if you were to install solar panels on your house and only charge from home, you would be completely emissions free on your electric vehicle, which is kind of the goal. So the next tool I wanted to go over is fueleconomy.gov. You can actually see the comparative total greenhouse gas emissions from an EV in your region. So your exact location based on your zip code compared to the average new gasoline vehicle. So for this one, it looks like a BMW i3 is only producing 150 grams of CO2 per mile, whereas the average new gasoline vehicle is producing about 410 grams per mile. So what do you need to know before buying an EV? Well, you want to consider these 4 questions here. How many miles do you drive in a day or a year? Are there other cars in the household? And how many long road trips do you take? So let's look at a few key tools I think everyone should use before buying an EV. The first one we saw on an earlier slide, it's fueleconomy.gov. It's a great place to find cars and compare fuel economy. So let me just get my browser up. This is fueleconomy.gov. You can find a car by going here and then just the home. You can browse by model, by class, and then by new cars. And since the new cars are the ones that are getting the incentive, let's do that today. And we want to look at SUVs. And so the first one that comes up is the Tesla Model Y, and then the Honda Kona. So let's go ahead and click on those two and then compare them. So then we can see, you know, how they match up together. So the Tesla Y has about a 125 miles per gallon equivalent, and the Kona has 130. And then you can save up to $3,250 over 5 years for the Tesla, and then $3,500 for the Kona. And so as you can see, the Tesla is a little more expensive than the Kona. And the Tesla actually is not eligible for the incentives, but the Kona is. And so you're knocking about $10,000 off the Kona upfront cost. So it is a little cheaper. So then I wanted to show you, let me get back to my slides. The Alternative Fuels Data Center is a great place to find charging stations and map routes. So before we go there, I wanted to go to the next slide and show you kind of the levels of EV charging infrastructure. So level 1 is going to be your slowest charge at about 2 to 5 miles per 1 hour of charge. Level 2 is going to be that middle range, kind of. Level 1 is probably going to be like your house charger. Level 2 is going to be more public charging, and that's going to be like 10 to 20 miles per 1 hour of charge. And then your DC fast is like the fastest charging stations, and they do about 60 to 80 miles per 20 minutes of charge. So let's go back to the Alt Fuels Data Center. And so you can actually, let's go to the beginning. Okay. And so you can locate your stations. And you can enter your zip code. So I believe Irving is 75014, and we want just electric. And so you can see some of the charging stations in Irving. And then if you zoom out, you can see all around Irving as well. And you've got one at the City Hall. And then we also have one at the Irving Library. And then all sorts of places. You'll see them mostly at shopping centers or food restaurants and stuff like that. So then we want to go ahead and map a route. So you can do that by just typing in 2 different locations. So I'm going to say we're going to go from Irving to Garland. I want to do 1 mile off the route. Don't get too far off the route. So you can see the route directions here, and then also download the stations on the route through this tool. So the next tool is our vehicle cost calculator. So you can compare vehicle cost based on the different model type. And so let's go do that real quick. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is the, you choose a vehicle to compare. And so you choose the year, the make, and the model. And I already chose the one because it was easier to do that. So here is what I chose. I chose the 2019 BMW i3 EV and then the 2019 BMW X1. And these are pretty comparable in size, I believe, but they do look like the i3 is a lot more expensive. Thankfully, the i3 has the $10 credit, so you can knock that off the price, and that comes to $340. And then looks like gasoline is probably like $184. And let's see, that'll work. Yeah. And so you can see that the i3 is a little cheaper once you get to the life of the car, and it's a little cheaper to start out just because of those incentives. So those are some good tools to use when you're looking for an EV. So I told you guys I was going to talk more about the incentives. So you can save up to $10,000 on the qualified PEV. The federal incentive is $2,500 to $7,500 depending on the make and model of the vehicle. And then the Texas Light Duty Motor Vehicle Purchaser Lease Incentive Program is up to $2,500, and that is a rebate, so you have to apply for that. And you can find all of these programs and more at our website, nctcog.org/AQFund. And then I wanted to give you guys some resources to go to later on. And this is our first one is the Electric Vehicles North Texas webpage, and we just put all of our stuff from our electric vehicle registration to some events we're having, trade-in drives that we have. We work on the National Drive Electric Week event every year. This year it is virtual, unfortunately, but we're still making it happen. That will showcase some EV drivers. They will send in some videos, and then we'll have a panel as well. So you can find all of that on our website in our meetings page. And then also the AQ funding, that's a great place to find incentives and funding for vehicles. Conserve North Texas is a great place for learning about conserving your water, your fuel, and your energy. And then the Go Solar Texas is a place where you can learn how to go solar, what your next steps are, and then kind of the solar 101 kind of thing. So that's my information. That's all I have today. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bethany. That was a really awesome presentation. Like I mentioned before, I get questions all the time on electric vehicles. So there's lots of great information for you. And we do have, the city has 3 locations of chargers that we installed. So here at City Hall, the West Irving Library, and the Irving Convention Center. And there's several ports at each of those. So those are part of the Blink network. So, you know, the public's free to use those whenever you like. So awesome. Okay, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat in the Q&A. I saw that we did have one question in the Q&A that I think Jason text responded to. Stacy was asking about if these things make a home Energy Star, or does that matter? So Jason, do you want to kind of get into that a little bit?
Well, I wasn't, yeah, sure. I wasn't, the only thing I mentioned Energy Star was in regard to appliances. I mean, I just bought a new dryer and it was an Energy Star dryer, for example. You'll notice it's usually pretty prominent labeling on Energy Star appliances. Actually, you can light fixtures. I mean, there's a whole variety of products you can buy that meet the Energy Star rating. But there's also, you can also have an entire home that meets Energy Star. And the newest version of Energy Star is what's called Energy Star 3.1, which is, it's a little better than Energy Code. Energy Star basically tries to stay above Energy Code, but what I find in reality, what makes Energy Star better is typically builders that do use that. I mean, granted that a lot of times it's mainly a marketing type thing, but for the most part, builders that I've seen that go through the Energy Star certification process, they actually do care a little bit more. On the Energy Star 3.1, you have to submit, and this is a big problem in Texas, it's called basically ACA Manual JS&D for layman's terms. Your air conditioner has to be the right one. They have to pick the right one and install it correctly. So there's some air conditioner verification in Energy Star 3.1 that's a little more rigorous than a traditional code-built home. The testing and balancing of the air conditioner that's required in Energy Star 3.1 has to meet at least the building thermal envelope requirements of the 2015 Energy Code, which a code-built home would have to as well, of course. But I think typically Energy Star inspectors are dotting the I's and crossing the T's a little bit more. Now, that's certainly not always the case. You could get a code-built home. You know, if you're looking at 2 homes side by side and you decide on the code-built home over the Energy Star home, it is entirely possible that that utility bill will be cheaper. But I would guess that that's not usually the case. But you're really only as good as your worst subcontractor on the job and your inspector and your builder. So you really kind of get quite a variety, but there is Energy Star appliances, Energy Star homes aren't necessarily the same thing other than the branding.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. I have a question for Bethany. I know you kind of mentioned this as far as taking road trips, but I wanted to ask, can people with electric vehicles take longer road trips, like let's say to Chicago or California or somewhere like that? And if they do, how would they be able to plan out their trip? Would they use the same tool, or what's the advice for that sort of a trip?
Yes, so they can take road trips. It really depends on your range of the vehicle. So Teslas have one of the best ranges, and then the new Nissan Leafs have a great range as well. So it just really depends on the range of the vehicle. Now, I've taken a Tesla to Destin, Florida from DFW, and we did just fine. We stopped a couple times on the way, but that was really it. And it took about 20 minutes to charge and we were good to go. But I think it really has to you have to do a little more research when you go on a road with an EV. You have to kind of think of where are we going to stop along the way, and where is there a charger along the way as well. So You can use the AFDC, the one that I just showed you. That's a great tool to use. There's also, charging apps for all of the providers, such as Blink or Electrify America, and tons more. So you just got to look up EV charging in your app store and you can find a ton. You just have to do a little more research, but it's totally possible depending on the range of your vehicle.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know that people find that very daunting and scary, but I hear from electric vehicle owners all the time that it's actually not as bad as you think it's going to be. And it's just like, when you're driving in the middle of nowhere and you can't find a gas station, you kind of have to think about things ahead of time. So awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I have another question for Jason. So let's say, hypothetically, what would you say is the best project or, thing to tackle if you're looking to do an energy efficiency project or renovation or something like that? What gives you the most bang for your buck?
That an impossible question to answer because it depends on your home. If your home it was built in 1965 and has single pane windows, but the attic has been upgraded and has 12 inches of insulation, then replacing the windows. So it would really be home specific. You would kind of want to follow that process. Like I said, the ideal thing, have some expert come out and do it for free. I love free. My favorite way to get anything is free. But if you can't have someone come out and do it, you really, you kind of want to think through that process, kind of like I mentioned, is, okay, what's the hottest part? So the attic. So I would start in my attic. If all of my ducts aren't leaking and I have plenty of insulation, then I might move to the windows and walls. But it's really going to be house specific. And if your utility provider will send someone out, having somebody come out and walk it and really look at all that for you, they'll be able to give you a pretty good idea. Oh, and you mentioned be careful what you sign up for. They gave us these fancy programmable thermostats, and I work from home, and I'll be in the middle of working and think, man, why am I sweating? And they have to get the free thermostats, I sign up for their savings. And so when they're really running high power, they'll get on the internet and adjust I keep them at 78 during the day, and they'll adjust them up to 84, and 84 just isn't comfortable. But however, where I work, who cares, right? No big deal. Bump it up to 84, and then it goes back down to 78 at 6 o'clock or whenever the savings event ends. But anyway, sorry, off topic there.
No, I mean, that's a good point. And actually in our webinar yesterday, someone showed a graph of energy usage in the house throughout the day, and she had to specify. Now, remember, this is pre-COVID, before people were working from home as much, because it does make a really big difference. So that's a good thing to keep in mind for sure. I guess I'll just wrap it up. We might have a question. Okay, we have a question from an attendee for Jason. Can you talk about attic radiant barriers? Do you recommend them?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was in the first draft of my presentation and I got rid of them. I do highly recommend them. I was down in the Valley recently giving a field training, and we're walking. We have inspectors from there was about 40 of us out there, inspectors from 9 different jurisdictions, several home builders, contractors, and we're walking this job, and I just look up and I'm like, why in the world aren't y'all using radiant barrier down here? And he's like, man, it's a $400 upgrade and the homeowner didn't want it. I know anecdotally, and I've seen the studies. Now, there can be some issues with radiant barriers in hot, humid climates, but it's not a fault of the radiant barrier. It's typically an air leakage problem. And the reason being, the hotter your attic gets, the better it will hold moisture before that moisture starts to condensate. But that doesn't mean you want your attic hot. It means you want to find your air leakage spots. So long story short, if I'm buying a new home, 100 times out of 100, I'm paying the $400 for the radiant barrier upgrade. It would pay for itself in 1, maybe 2 summers in Texas climate. It is an absolute no-brainer. It's $1 or $2 a sheet more for radiant barrier already built in. Now, if I'm doing a retrofit on a home, kind of depends on how handy I am. My boss, when I worked for the city of Granbury, he was ecstatic. He spent, I think it was $2,200 or something. He installed it himself over about 3 weekends, and they were little foil-faced panels, bent and stuck in between your rafters, and so they created a little air gap, and they created that radiant barrier. But he said his utility bill went down $40 to $50 a month just from adding the radiant barrier. And that the data on them, it shows it will lower your attic temperature on average about 20 degrees, but as much as 30 degrees. So aftermarket radiant barriers are a real good idea. I'm not a big fan on, a lot of people will use the power vent attic fans. Well, a lot of times I don't recommend those for the attic. I mean, for the attic, radiant barrier would be one of my first things, adding insulation, sealing the penetrations through the lid, adding more ventilation if I need it. Code requires the minimum ventilation. It's 1 square foot of opening per every 300 square feet of floor area in your attic. And I've written 100 red tags for underventilated attics. It's pretty regular here in Texas. And the reason being, I mean, your attic might require 4 square feet of opening at the roof. Well, they'll put 4 of those little 1 foot diameter static attic vents up on your roof. Well, those don't have a full square foot of opening. They have about a half of one. So you're half as ventilated as you should be. So looking at adding attic ventilation, the power vents, the problem with those is they'll actually pull a suction and you'll be pulling conditioned air out of your home, and they actually pull power even. I mean, so I like the mechanical. You know, if you're getting a new roof and you just have the static vents, I would really look at going to add it's called a whirlybird. That's actually a brand name, but it's you see those that spin, they're hot and they spin. So they just pull a little bit of draft through the attic and keep it ventilated. But yeah, cooling your attic, big plus, and radiant barrier is a great way to do it.
Well, great. Thank you so much. That was a lot of good information. And with that, that takes us just about to time. So I want to say thank you so much to our speakers. You did an awesome job, and I hope everyone learned a lot. Remember, this webinar, as well as yesterday's and tomorrow's, are going to be recorded, so you can always have them for playback. They'll probably be on the website about next week or so. Check out our webpage for the event. There's lots of YouTube videos and articles and all sorts of good stuff on there. And also just check out our Think Green, Be Green page. We're having more classes throughout the year. We're going to do more on gardening. We have a class on beekeeping in November, which is one of my most asked for classes. So we're very excited for that. So without further ado, everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good lunch, and I hope to see you on our webinar tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Everyone have a good one.